Hello and welcome to another edition of the Irish Angle on Jump to It. As usual, I'm joined by Johnny Ward and Emma Nagle, and this week we're going to have a look at all the things that happened in the last week, which is the Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe meeting, obviously, and Christophe Soumillon, which was the big news from last week, but also lots of things happened in Ireland. So we get straight into it. Johnny, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Vinny.
And tell me, first of all, what's your opinion on Christophe Soumillon, his 60 days? Was it the right decision? Was it the wrong decision? How reckless was he?
Well, he was unbelievably reckless, and I suppose the problem with this is, what is the correct punishment for Christophe Soumillon? I mean, if you were to make a case for me that Christophe Soumillon should be banned for life, I don't think it's the most ridiculous. I don't necessarily agree, but you could make a case when you're endangering a jockey to the extent that he did with Ross Ryan. Could I trust that jockey in a race going forward when he did something like early on in a race in which you wouldn't even think, adrenaline had completely gotten the better of him at that time? It looked almost premeditated. It was utterly reckless. And considering how falling off a jumps horse is dangerous, falling off a flat horse in many respects more dangerous. You don't expect it, and you're going faster, often usually on faster ground. I don't know what the adequate punishment was. We then had the strange situation, Vinny, obviously, of his ban not kicking into place for the Arc weekend, for the remainder of the French weekend. So he rocked up in Longchamp for some big race rides, including on Videni in the Arc, and nearly winning the race. I'd love to know what the reception was for him in the weighing room at Longchamp. I know he admitted what he did afterwards and apologised and all that, but I'm not a jockey, but I realise that, manoeuvres take place in races, but this was more like something you'd see on a football pitch than, trying to, get a position in terms of your horse, maybe taking a gap up the rail or closing a gap up the rail. We do see these happening. It's very, very dangerous. This was absolutely outrageous, and we're recording this on just afternoon on Monday. I suspect he'll lose his job at the Aga Khan. I don't know what's going to happen there, but I think he should. And ultimately, I think it's up to owners when he comes back from his ban to decide what to do with him again, because I think Christophe Soumillon's CV will forever be tainted by this. I thought it was an outrageous thing to do.
Yeah, well, I have to say, I'm in agreement. I thought it was scandalous what he did, and he should have got a lot more than 60 days. I also think the ban should have come into effect straight away rather than giving him the 9 or 10 days under the normal ruled situation. The interesting thing here is that what we've seen is the vast majority of people seem to agree with us on this, that the ban wasn't enough. Yet two people came out over the weekend and seemed to think it was okay, which was Ruby Walsh and Justin Weaver, both former jockeys. So maybe there's more to it from a jockey point of view. Emma, what did you think of that? Do you think they have a point that maybe it was an adequate punishment? I certainly didn't think it was.
No, I listened to Ruby's comments, and to be honest, I think it's kind of hard to make the argument that it was a racing manoeuvre, because his horse was going nowhere in a hurry, and Ross had every right to be where he was. And to me, it just looked like a rush of blood to the head and just a pure act of anger. Like, I think Ruby was comparing it to jostling in athletics and other sports, but I think the only kind of thing I could compare it to in sports was like maybe when Zidane gave the headbutt in the World Cup, or when Suarez bit Chiellini or something like that. But the difference is, I mean, in horse racing, you can't do mad things like that because, someone's life will be in danger. And I think there's no excuse for Soumillon. He's 41 years of age. He's been around the block and back, and he should know you can't do that kind of thing, because Rasa could have been seriously injured. And you'd have to wonder, if it was Rasa who gave the elbow, would the ban have been 2 months, or are they taking into consideration that Christophe is a senior jockey and he's quite famous, and or were they maybe a bit more reluctant to give him a longer term ban, because the ban seems extremely lenient. It was actually it was interesting because just before the race, I'd actually seen a video on Twitter of a similar incident in Ecuador. It was nearly the exact same thing, and jockey leaned over and knocked the other right off the horse, and he was actually banned for life. I agree with Johnny. I think you can make a case for that kind of a ban. I wouldn't necessarily say I'd be banning him for life either, but I think once was definitely very lenient for what he did. I think they probably took into consideration that Rasa wasn't injured, but really I think they should take into consideration what could have happened rather than that, because Rosser could have been paralysed, he could have been killed. And, is it going to take something like that before a rider gets banned? And it's not something we'd see often, but is it going to take a rider getting seriously injured before a real ban would be given for something like that?
Yeah, one of the
agree.
strangest judicial anomalies, I think, Vinny, is you get a far lesser sentence for attempted murder than murder if you intended to do it, and it just happens that the murder didn't take place. I mean, are you getting off on one here? If Ross Ryan had suffered horrific paralysis, what difference would that have made? And he could have, because what Emma's saying is right. That incident in Ecuador, you expect to see something like this, with all due respect, in some far-flung second or third-rate racing jurisdiction, not France. And I think you need to have a punishment that fits the crime here. And the fact that Ross emerged unscathed is almost irrelevant.
Yeah, but it obviously is relevant, is the point, isn't it? That it's because he was unscathed that I think Soumillon got 60 days, and they just took it as a riding offence, when it appears to most of us that it was a lot more than a riding offence. This was something reckless, dangerous, and put someone's life at risk, which is the bottom line. Anyway, we'll move on. We've discussed it. We'll go on to the Arc itself. It was a fantastic race. I really enjoyed watching it, with Alpinista beating Soumillon on Vedeni, and then Frankie Dettori finishing third onto Quattro Tasso. I thought that was the unlucky horse of the race, last year's winner. What you make of it, Johnny? Was it a vintage renewal, do you think?
Definitely not. I know Turquedo Tasso obviously has that back form in the race, and the ground came right for him. We had a full field, which didn't convenience a lot of horses, including him. With the drought we've had in Europe this summer, it was almost reassuring to see something like you can get on Arc Day, like a lot of rain and the ground turned soft. And I think it was a somewhat underwhelming weekend in the respect of the Irish horses running, with Kyprios winning in a canter, but showing helpful idiosyncrasies in terms of how he'll be ridden going forward. I think they know him a bit better after his performance. In terms of the Arc itself, that was our only Irish winner, I think, over the 2 days. So the Arc itself, we were reliant mainly on Luxembourg. I actually think Luxembourg didn't run badly, Vinny. I think I just spoke to Aidan O'Brien here this morning, now before we went on air, just with a view to the show, and he said hopefully he will stay in training as a 4-year-old, and I think that'll be good for racing. We see Luxembourg, if he were to retire now, he'd go to stud as a reasonably good horse who won obviously the Champion Stakes, but he seemed to show limitations in the Arc. I'd like to see him on good ground over a mile and a half again. I liked his attitude, because he effectively had no chance for much of the race. The ground he had to make up. Not that he got necessarily a bad ride, but I think on the terrain on the day, he wasn't really able to pick up off the pace maybe like others could. And I thought it'll stand to him, that performance. The race itself, I mean, massive result for Frankel, obviously winning the Arc for the first time. Churchill had a good weekend as a stallion. He nearly had an Arc winner and had a Group 1 winner at Longchamp as well. But I mean, the mad aspect of the race is if Vedeni had won, what would the reaction have been in the post parade? I mean, remember when Dylan Thomas won the Arc and Kieran Fallon sort of grabbed a tricolour as soon as he could, probably thinking there's a chance this horse will be thrown out. And there was a lot of controversy that day. But God, imagine if Vedeni had won. In terms of the race itself, I don't think it'll go down as one of the most memorable. I thought the Arc weekend itself wasn't particularly notable for amazing performances, but massive result for Frankel, obviously, and Prescott and connections.
Yeah, the other thing here is you're talking about Luxembourg maybe staying on at 4, which would be great to see. That was an interesting aspect to the Arc for me, is the fact that 8 of the 20 were 5-year-olds or older, and no geldings allowed run. So these are colts and mares. Emma, is that something that would suit you, flat racing? If we saw a lot of older horses, these horses stay in training for another year or two. We've got Bayid is going to run in a couple of weeks, and it'll be the last time we'll ever see him. Pushing them off the stud at 3 seems to be detrimental to the sport itself. Obviously, there's so much money at stake at stud is the issue. But Luxembourg at 4 sounds good, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's actually interesting, because that I was actually wondering that after the Arc, whether he was that the last we'd see of him, because I think it was a reoccurrence of the injury that made him miss the Derby with a muscle injury in his hip, I think. So yeah, though it's great to see him coming back at 4, because I think he was very impressive in the Champion Stakes, but he definitely still has something to prove. I agree with Johnny, he didn't run a bad race in the Arc. I think the ground the ground was probably just way too heavy for him. It was a real bog, and he probably just didn't like that. But no, it's brilliant that they're going to bring him back. Like, it's kind of hard to gauge how much commercial value he would have going after stud after just winning a champion stakes and running okay in an arc. So no, it's good to see him coming back. But no, I would like to see horses stay in training for longer. I think that's probably a problem in the flat. I suppose, like, obviously you have to take into consideration the money involved, but it's kind of probably draws away from the attraction to the flat from the public, because it's hard to get connected with these horses when you're only seeing them for a year or 2 years, and then they're gone, and you might see their children in a few more years. That's probably the last you hear of them. But yeah, no, I definitely would like to see the horses staying on and racing further. But yeah, it probably wasn't a vintage renewal of the Arc. It was a brilliant to see the Alpinista. She's a really likeable mare. She's real tough, and great for Luke Morris as well. He's a real grafter, and for him to get a win on the big stage was brilliant. I think he's actually back in Wolverhampton for 6 rides tonight, so it just kind of shows his dedication to the sport, and it's great for a rider like that to get their day on the big stage.
Yeah, and of course Mark Prescott must have known he had something special in the beginning, because she won first time out. Normally they all run over short trips for 3 or 4 runs, then come back the following season over extended distances and run up a sequence. But Alpinista won first time out, well backed first time out as well, over 7 furlongs. It was a great performance. The other one for me for the weekend, I thought Platinum Queen, a 2-year-old winning the Prix de l'Abbé, first one in 44 years. Did you watch that race, Johnny? I thought the camera angles were atrocious. It reminded me of the old Phoenix Park, horses coming at you head on. It's hard to believe that they can't put a camera somewhere side on to that to give us some sort of an idea what's really going on in the race, rather than looking at head on of 2 separate groups of horses coming at you.
Yeah, I actually think cameras and generally the way racing is covered is something that we don't talk about enough. I really like drone footage of racing as at least as one of the options while you're watching the race. I think we've spoken about this, Vinny. The idea of the kind of the ambulance cam, the revolving cam, I'm not a fan of. I think it's hard to know, but this takes the biscuit altogether. And I've seen this race from the perspective of a race score in Longchamp. It's a disaster. It's obviously an anomalous track, and it's an anomalous 5 furlong race in the Arc itself. And obviously the story of the race is the 2-year-old winning, brilliant for Holly Doyle, and creating a bit of history in the race. But yeah, it's taken massively away from it in terms of the perspective of it. And again, it was a kind of I guess the Irish sprinting division isn't that strong at the minute. I think, in fairness to Ken Condon, Moss Tucker ran very well. He ran a couple in the race, but it was just a remarkable. It's very, very tough for a 2-year-old to beat the Elders. It was a holding on job at the end, but as you mentioned, the camera angle leaves a lot to be desired.
Yeah, and we'll move across then to Ireland. We had lots of things happen during the week. Any highlights for you from the week? We had the Barney Curley Day, charity day in Bellewstown on Wednesday, with Frankie Dettori and Willie Mullins as the team captains. It was a bit tongue-in-cheek. It was added a little bit to the spectacle. Did you watch much of the racing during the week? Was that one of your highlights?
Yeah, it was good to see. I think there was a good camera shot of Willie and Frankie kind of edging each other up inside the parade ring. Look, it was only a bit of banter, really. I suppose no one taking it too seriously. It was great to see the money being raised for the charity. Anyway, it's great for Frankie to come over as well. In fairness, kind of really draws a good crowd to the meeting, and like he's great for racing. And I think it was the anniversary of his 7-timer, was it that day. And like, I actually saw an interview of him back on that day, and like you would wonder, like, is racing ever going to find a character the same as Frankie Dettori? Like, and it's I suppose, is it worrying in a way, because Frankie adds so much to racing. I mean, who's going to carry that flag when Frankie's gone? Because Frankie's getting on in age now, and he's been in racing for a long, long time, and the crowds that he can draw, and just the entertainment that he brings to a race course, like it's something that I don't think we probably appreciate enough, really, because he's been around for so long. But he's brilliant for the sport.
Yeah, I think just generally, he broke the mold, I suppose, when he came along, and he's such an infectious character. It's very hard to see the likes of the top jockeys that we have now, both flat and national hunt. They're so much more dedicated than previous generations would have been. And they're into their fitness, and they're into doing everything right. Like, you look at Colin Keane, very clean cut guy. Here you have Paul Townend in the national hunt side of it, but lots of them, they're all the same, more or less. But we don't have the characters like a Paul Carberry that we would have had a few years ago. And Frankie is obviously the ultimate character in showmanship and everything else. So he will be sorely missed when he's gone. There's no doubt about it. It's very hard to see Ryan Moore doing the jumping off horses when he wins or anything else. We're not going to see any of that stuff going on, showboating and the rest of it. Johnny, what did you make of the week? Did that float your boat, the Barney Curley Day in Bellewstown?
I went to it last year, Vinny, and I've spoken a bit about it since. Rachel Blackmore, it struck me at summer tracks this year how much Rachel Blackmore attention she gets. But Frankie was literally flies around shit that day at Bellewstown. I mean, and it gave me an insight into Frankie's life, because Frankie, for me, is one of the most intriguing people in sport, not to mind racing, because he's done so much for the sport with the 7-timer. But for me, if not a dark side to Frankie, there's definitely a side where he's a totally different person when the camera's not on him. And I found this myself in my brief sort of interactions with him, where he's a showman. He totally puts on a show. And I think he's had his own troubles in his life as well. And I think there's a lot more to the character than meets the kind of the public eye, and it is amazing. I don't think there isn't a replacement for Frankie Drury in terms of what he's done for racing. He's such a recognisable name across all sport, and I think we can safely say it's not going to be Christophe Soumillon anyway as his replacement as the man for racing. But Rachel's probably doing a comparable job at the moment. I honestly mean that, in terms of the mould that she's broken. For me, I was at Clonmel for Racing TV on Thursday. Vinny had a nice day out there. It was fairly mundane stuff. It was interesting that they didn't run the chases on the card because they figured that it was too complex to water the track, to water both tracks. I think they ended up getting enough rain, but interesting that in October you've problems with the watering system at a track, or perceived problems at a watering system or a track in Ireland, and it's just interesting going forward. I think my undisputed highlight though was Clifftop winning the Mary Rogers Memorial Handicap. Obviously the inaugural running. Mary passed away last year. I know Paul Brown, who would be a long time kind of patron of Harry's, and Harry and Mary, I mean, it's the new, I don't know if you want to call it the fad, it's the new thing that you have the name, the father and the son name as the trainer. But like Harry and Mary Rogers were a total 2-person show, and it was almost like true love. Like, you just tell how much they loved each other's company, and she was taken far too early. And like, I don't think Harry's had a winner yet this season. He may have had one winner. I should have checked that, but I texted him on the night of the race saying that he still needed Mary to get a winner for him, because Clifftop obviously won the race. Big gamble. If you were one of these punters who really did your study and kind of put 2 and 2 together, it wouldn't have surprised you that Clifftop won. Siobhan Rutledge doing the ride as well. I think she got a few days ban actually, and Harry had a runner in the 2nd division, which was well back but didn't win. That would have been quite a story. But like, I'd say for Harry, and I'd imagine for Henry de Bromhead and Heather at the moment, having horses around is just something to keep you going in really difficult times. And I think everything that he does, I'd say he thinks about Mary every hour of the day. And there was something really special about this. I don't believe in the afterlife and all that stuff, but if you do believe in it, she was smiling down on Harry at Bellewstown.
Yeah, I thought that was my highlight of the week, without a doubt, was Harry having the winner in the race named after his wife, Mary. I'd say I was on the circuit for over 20 years, going all around the country, every race meeting, every day. And the one thing that was a constant there was Harry and Mary. The two of them were always there. They travelled up and down the country from their base in RD in County Louth. They only had a small number of horses, but they seemed to have the likes of Killarney. You'd go down there, the rest of us would stay there for 4 days. Harry and Mary would go up and down in a horse box all 4 days with one runner a day. And then the next day, then they're off to Ballinrobe. Then they're down to Wexford, constantly on the road. They did some amount of mileage down the years, always together, a 2-person outfit, as you say. And it was very sad that Mary passed last year, and Harry would obviously be gutted by that. And to think now, he has had a few winners this year. He's had 3 or 4, I think, already. But for a very small yard, very few runners nowadays, it was great for him to be able to get one ready and win win the race in honour of his wife Mary, and it was a lovely day. See, their son Christopher was there as well. It was really nice that they were all there for it and everything else, and lots of family and friends turned up for the day too. So it was a great celebration for them in memory of Mary, who was a lovely woman, really, really nice. We're going to carry on. We're going to look at the rest of the week. Had you a horse that came out of the week that you fancy, Emma, that'll win in future for us? Something you saw?
Yeah, well, there was some great racing yesterday in Tipperary. I think that Champ Kiley for Willie Mullins could be a smart enough novice hurdler this year. I think they were touting him for a Royal Bond horse, and it's kind of hard to know what kind of route he'll go, though. You'd imagine Willie probably has better novices for the 2 miles and 2.5 miles, so maybe they might step up to 3. But one that kind of stuck out to me that didn't actually win would be Kingswood for John Donoghue. He was actually second in the maiden at Tipperary, the first race. He was second behind the Ballydoyle horse, or the Aidan O'Brien horse, the Luxembourg Connections, Covert Gardens. I thought the winner was very impressive, and they're kind of touting him as a Group 1 horse. So I thought this horse, he really stepped it up well on his debut. He ran on well. I love the way he finished off his race, and he's a half brother to the unbeaten St. Leger winner Elder Alderoff. So I think next year, or maybe later on in the season, even stepping up and trip, he's probably one that will win plenty of races and might even be a classy enough horse next year, maybe.
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, I saw there was a few quid for him before the race as well, so they obviously knew they had something with a bit of talent. That other race you mentioned, Champ Kiley, that was interesting that he's a point-to-point horse. He'd won 2 mile 5 when he won his first hurdle race. It was back to 2 miles in Tipperary. Trip doesn't seem to make a difference. That's always a sign of a good one, I would have thought. There was another good horse ran in that. A horse I like anyway is Brazil, which is still a colt. Pádraig Roach finished second, hadn't had a run since the end of the jump season. It was the Boodles winner in Cheltenham last March. And I thought Brazil actually ran quite well there. I thought it was a fair performance because the winner probably is very smart. So Brazil is one. I wouldn't mind keeping an eye on that again. And the other one, Pádraig Roach also produced another one, very similar profile, a 3-year-old colt called Cougar, which won during the week, had been with Aidan O'Brien, transferred over to JP McManus's ownership and goes to Pádraig Roach and wins there. What do you think of that, Johnny? Did you see Cougar win?
Yeah, Cougar was good, and as you mentioned, Brazil, it's interesting that he's still an entire. What are they going to do with him? Could he be one of these? Could have been one of these jump stallions like Alderbrook, who was a jumper who stayed in the ranks like nickname as a jump stallion, and it was a good performance yesterday. It'll be interesting to see how his season goes. Cougar's definitely a nice recruit. I thought the performance of C'est La Vie at Gowran really had some nice. It felt like, I always feel this meeting at Gowran is kind of the start of the jump season to an extent. It's just that passage from sort of Listowel into the actual jumps meets, and we did have some soft ground as well coming into play. And C'est La Vie's performance just beat the Mediator 15 lengths. And the Mediator's not a bad horse. We sent off 3s on, I think, on debut, and even Ballinlough Gale, who's third, wouldn't be bad. C'est La Vie absolutely bolted up. Just a horse I want to mention going forward before the season is out is Yokel. I tipped Yokel up at Killarney. I thought he was desperately unlucky. There was a question mark in terms of the ground and the trip, because I suppose her progress had been over a little bit further, dropped her back to a mile on soft ground, but I thought being by fast company would suit. I thought she should have won, and she's going to be very well handicapped going forward. And just looking up the Harry Rogers stats there, Vinny, is actually shining on the Harry this season. He's now had 4 winners, and he's only had 4 winners from 40 runners, and he's only had 1 placed horse, so his stats are heavily aligned towards winners, and maybe Mary is actually shining down on him.
Yeah. Another thing I'd have to say from during the week, one of the races I saw that I thought was a masterclass from Derek O'Connor. He won on a horse called Troubled Times, a listed bumper on Friday in Gowran Park. All the rest of the riders came out wide for better ground, but he stuck to the far rail like glue. And at the start of the race, it looked like it was a stupid decision because he seemed to be miles behind them and going nowhere. He'd no chance. But he stuck there, was up in contention most of the way and ended up winning the race. Seemingly he walked the track beforehand, found a small strip of decent ground right on the rail, stuck to that and won. But that's why he's one of the best amateur riders we've had. And for me,
just on that, Vinny, if I could,
yes.
So if I could very briefly interject, that's
a big tip.
That point you make there, with the fact that we're not getting as much rain in Ireland really in the summer anymore. I think this is a fact, and watering is an artificial man and woman done job. So you are going to get anomalies in terms of ground. Even it might go back to previous watering, and I think it's beholden on every jockey when the ground is unnaturally watered, even in the recent past. Walk the track, because you are going to get anomalies day to day, absolutely, and that's why it looks so good when it works out well.
Yeah, and we've seen it down the years. Any jockey that's willing to put in the effort and do that. Danny Mullins is someone who we've seen it do several times in recent months, where he's ridden a different part of the track to the rest of them and has won races. I love seeing that. Chris Hayes is someone who's done it in the past as well. Another one who puts the extra effort in, and that's what it is. Like, you see some of the jockeys, admittedly, they arrive in 10 minutes before their first ride, rushing into the track, get changed on the horse and go. But you do see a lot of them don't. They come early, they walk the track, they put the effort in. A lot of apprentices too do it. So it's great to see, and it's great to see it pay off for someone like Derek O'Connor. Possibly would have won anyway. I don't know, but it was great to see him do something a little bit different. From myself, for a horse that I think maybe is worth watching, is a horse called Ransom of Dennis Hogan. It ran in one of those Barney Curley races. There were 2 charity races. The Barney Curley Charity Cup it ran in, and Tom Queally rode it. I thought, in fairness, he gave it a poor ride. Had the horse in a bad position early on, shot through to try and get into contention on the inner before the turn into the straight. I think he made his ground too quick was the first thing. And then he went to go to the outside. Then he decided not to go to the outside. He goes back to the inside, and then the door was closed on him, and he got no run in the last couple of 100 yards. He said himself afterwards that he didn't think the horse would have won. I think he's covering up for a poor ride, and I think the horse would have won. I think it was unlucky, and it'll be one to watch maybe the next day when it comes along. Lastly, one other thing is we've got the point-to-point season back. Is that something that you're going to be involved in, Emma? With your family, you'll have some runners there, will you?
Yeah, they're getting ready to run now, hopefully. But yeah, I think the first meeting kicked off yesterday. Was it Castlenclean yesterday? I think it was. Oh no, it was up in Toonbridge yesterday. Sorry, I think Colin Bowe had the 2 4-year-old winners. So yeah, just getting started now. I suppose it'll be good to see kind of the points back on a Sunday, and it's great to get back into the swing of things. Forward to now, I suppose. Yeah, I wouldn't mind having a horse myself to ride, but they're kind of a bit expensive at the moment.
And will you go point to point? And Johnny, is that one of your things during the winter months?
I only go the odd time. I really enjoy it because it's a little bit like racing in the old days, where the betting exchange isn't relevant. So the betting ring is all you have, and a lot of the time it's about chat. Like, so it's like the old maidens of the 2-year-old maidens. You're talking about chat, and I've been at Killa point to point. I've been amazed at the amount of bookies there. But Emma touched on an interesting point there, that it's like a victim of its own success, that it's almost it's costly to get a horse to ride in a point to point now, because that game has gone so professional, and I guess that's not what it was intended to be, whether you think that's a good or a bad thing.
Yeah, one interesting thing you mentioned there is about the betting side of things, which that's something I've never understood this. I'm someone who, I love the form. I love studying form. That's why a lot of the things you'll see on irishracing.com come out of my head, that they're things for how do you study form? How can you better understand what the form is and find a winner in a race? I love that challenge. And yet, consistently, the most watched or most viewed pages on irishracing.com is the bumper every day, where there's practically no form to go on, which is the very same thing you're talking about in point to points, and the same with 2-year-old maidens. It's an Irish thing, isn't it? People just love the little whisper and the chat about a tip for this, that's working well.
Yeah,
I can't see it myself. It's something that it's never appealed to me. I much prefer the races where you can get stuck into a big 20-runner handicap and go through all the form and weigh it up and sort out the ground, the distance and everything else. But people just prefer to hear the little whisper that Freddie told Mary that Johnny's horse is working real well and he'll win tomorrow, and so on. But there you go. It's an Irish thing, I think.
It's always gas this time of year. There's lads tipping up every horse who won a point to point last year for the champion bumper, and sure, most of them have never seen a race course. This horses, if you look at the champion bumper betting this year, this horse has never seen a race course, and they're 14, 16 to 1 to win the champion bumper. It's mad. I don't know how anyone could be backing them. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, and you'll see it over in Cheltenham even on the day. You'll get some mad joke. Just the rumour starts spreading around that this is catching pigeons at home and all the rest of it, and everyone wants to row into it. I've seen a few of them down the years. I remember there was one, was it a Magner horse in a bumper one year? I can't think, it could have been with Edward O'Grady. I remember being over in Cheltenham, and I couldn't believe the money for the horse. backed off the board, ran a steamer nowhere. But that's kind of the way it goes a lot of the time. Anyway, we've enough talked for today. I'd say people will have enough of this. No point going much longer than now. So we'll see you all again next week. Hopefully you'll join us for another chat about horse racing, and we'll have a look at what happens this week. Plenty more action to come. Thanks for joining us. Bye for now.